Hello again, everyone. I'm here again with another travel palette swatching video for watercolors. I am approaching the end of this swatch book, which I keep in this Chic Sparrow Narrow. As usual, I'm going to put a link to the video where I talk about this setup below. So I'm going to take this out of the frame. I've already taken out the swatch book here. So let me just set that to the side. Oh, and I didn't notice this box is a little bit scratched up. So I am almost to the end of the book. There is only a couple more videos that I have queued up. I have a couple of pages left in this swatch book, and I have definitely built some additional palettes, but I am changing around the additional palettes so much that I haven't really set those up in here yet, and I think that I might, at least for a little while, stop with the next video, which is going to be swatching the Kings Creek wood palette, which I have all Daniel Smith in, and I have it set up with Jane Blundell's color palette in there. But for today, I am going to be doing this large square wood palette that it came from Nature Sketches, I think is the name of the person on Etsy who made these. I have not seen these available again on the Etsy site, so I'm not sure if she's going to be making them again, but I will put a link to that site in any case. And I think you've seen, those of you who have seen that other video, I have shown this on the channel before when I was just kind of messing around with some watercolors. I haven't used this one all that much. This is kind of the problem with having so many different palettes. I tend to use the same palettes again and again, and I don't generally go back and use other ones all that much, but I do want to start doing that. I have been crazy busy with work, and it's been very hard to kind of fit things in. I've been doing videos, but I haven't been doing a whole lot of art outside of the watercolor classes that I'm currently taking. So I do want to play more with these palettes, but let's go ahead and swatch this one out so you can see. I already have a small swatch sheet here that I've done for this palette. And this was trying to just get together a bunch of different brands and kind of have a deep palette, a deep color palette here that was kind of nice and neutral somewhat. So we'll see if you agree with that. My only problem with this particular palette in its construction is that this little mixing area, they've put a little metal piece down in here. I don't even know what material it might be, but it's coated in white lacquer or something like that. But it's a little sharp around some of the edges. I mean, this is handmade, so you never know. You never know what you're going to get with handmade items, but it is quite a little lovely box. Fitting pans in here was kind of difficult as well. What I ended up doing was putting these little metal palettes from the art toolkit in here and then putting them, affixing them to the bottom of this little wood area here with earthquake putty. So that has worked fine. They have not moved around at all. The only thing is that some of these little pans have gotten pretty dried and the actual colors in them have dried so much that they're coming a little loose, but that's kind of normal for these. And I will go ahead and start swatching, and then I'll just tell you some observations about some of these colors and some of these brands as we go through. And as usual, at the end I will do a little triad mixing swatch here down at the bottom. But I won't go into those colors now. I will just go ahead and do these swatches of all the individual colors, and then I will talk about why I chose the colors for the little triad down here. Off to the side, I have a glass bottle of water or a cup of water, and I also have a paper towel. Today I'm going to be using a slightly different brush just because I don't know what I did with my little travel brush that I normally use. And I've been using this Kolinsky brush, which I believe is a Rhapsody brush from Jerry's Artarama. And I've been using it quite a bit, and it's actually been working pretty well. The other one that I've been using for all of these other samples or swatches are, that one was synthetic. So sometimes it doesn't hold water as well as a natural hairbrush, but I think they're both fine. This is mostly because I could not find that travel brush, so this is what I'll be using today. Oh, and if I didn't mention, I am going to be putting links to all of the prior swatching videos that I've done. Once I am done with this series, and once I do the next one, I think I am going to be done with the series, at least for a little while. I may come back and readdress it at some other point with new palettes or something like that. But once I am done, I will do a flip through of the entire book, and I will probably go back to the other book that I have in the same Chic Sparrow. Here, I'll go ahead and show you the other completed note book that's in here, and I'll probably, some of these are no longer valid, but the ones that are, I think what I'll do is I'll go back with each of them and show you the palette that this is for, because some palettes like the Ultimate Travel palette, or the Ultimate, I forget, Ultimate palette, I think is what it's called, but the little plastic palette, that's one of the ones that I've already done and has not changed at all, so I didn't show it on the channel yet. So I would like to go back and show that to you all. But enough yakking on my part. Why don't I go ahead and get started? I'm going to arrange this in a way that makes sense here. And I'm also going to zoom in a little bit for you. Let's go ahead and go there. I think that should be good. I'm going to have the palette over here. And as usual, you won't really be able to see all of the different colors, but again, I'll show you the full palette at the end before we go. So I just kind of went across each row, I believe, in how I've set this up here. This first one is Phthalo Blue Red Shade by Daniel Smith. And this is a very, very, oops, looks like I have a little hair at the end of my brush. Probably a dog hair would be my guess. I got that off. So this is a very pigmented color. All the phthalos tend to be very pigmented. And this one, as you saw, is red shade as opposed to green shade, which is, I think people see green shade a little bit more often. But the red shade actually has a very beautiful, intense color, but when you dilute it out, it also does some really nice things. It has a really nice tone in the when you dilute it. And if you could, when it's in its diluted form, you could use it in skies or something like that. I would not use it full strength in skies because I think it's just a little too strong. All right, so this next one is Daniel Smith Deep Scarlet. This is another one of my favorites by Daniel Smith. This red is just really deep and beautiful, and it makes some really nice mixes with other colors. And funny enough, I don't have that color in here, but one of the nicest mixes that you can make with a deep scarlet like this, either this one or a different brand, is you can mix it with Phthalo Blue green shade, and it makes a really beautiful dark. So that is something that's very nice. You can mix it with the blue shade and it will still mix a dark, but I think when you have, because the green shade is a little bit more opposite on the color wheel, so it kind of neutralizes it a little bit more. This next one is Sennelier Yellow Sophie, as you can see in the pan here. So Sennelier, I do like Sennelier. You haven't seen a lot of Sennelier in my collection of watercolors, mostly because I think that they're a little bit bright and garish on their own. They're still beautiful watercolors and they do make quite lovely mixes, but I find their colors to just be a little too bright for my liking right out of the tube. And this is the tube watercolor. And one thing that I've found with the tube watercolor is that it really has a hard time solidifying in the pan. So I would not recommend the tube watercolor for travel. I would specifically buy the half pans, or I think I don't know if they sell full pans, but I know they have half pans. But I would specifically buy the hardened pans because they are conditioned to travel, whereas these, it's clearly a different formula between the tubes and the pans. The colors seem to be about the same between the two from the ones that I have both a pan and a tube, but the tubes are just really hard to deal with when they're dried, which is kind of strange because I mean, I don't plan to use it right out of the tube, so I find the tube colors a little bit not helpful. I have them in palettes that I use at home, but I generally do not use them in travel palettes. Although this is a travel palette, I have not taken this out of the house really. So this is Grumbacher Ultramarine Blue, which is actually a very beautiful ultramarine blue. This is one of the only colors I have in the Grumbacher watercolor. All of these are artist grade. And I think really the reason why I don't have more of the Grumbacher is because they're kind of pricey compared to other brands. But clearly, if this is any indication with this one, they have really beautiful colors. And I love the granulation that you get with this particular one. Okay, so then we have Daniel Smith Rhodonite Genuine. So this is a genuine pigment from Daniel Smith, but it's very, very pink and beautiful. This is one that I've really kind of warmed up to the more I use it. You can kind of use this in place of a quinacridone rose, which is another color that I almost always have on my palette. And because this is a genuine mineral, it has a little bit of granulation too, which is really pretty. Pretty much all of the genuine line from Daniel Smith are granulating. So this next one, oh, this is another color that I really love that the swatch that I already made really does not show it that well. It's Schmincke Mahogany Brown, or is it? No, it's Madder Brown, I'm sorry. Which is really beautiful. The Schmincke Mahogany Brown is also another one of my favorites, but I don't think I have it in this palette. But this Madder Brown is just a really beautiful reddish brown, and you can use this color in place of a red earth. I'm going to move this palette over so that I can get in here a little bit better. You could use this instead of a red earth just because it does have such an earthy tone. Well, I think I took too much pigment away when I did that. And it's really lovely. And you probably already know that Schmincke is my second favorite brand after Daniel Smith. So you see a lot of them in my palettes. So this next one is Holbein Burnt Sienna. And this is a lovely burnt sienna. I love it a lot. I have actually replaced the burnt sienna that I had in my main travel palette with this Holbein Burnt Sienna. For a while I had Winsor Newton, and I think I've talked about how Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith don't always get along. And then for a while I also had sorry, I was rinsing off my brush too soon again. Where was I? Oh, and then for a while I had the Daniel Smith Burnt Sienna, and I did not like, I think the Daniel Smith Burnt Sienna is just not the right tone for me. I just don't like it very much. But the Holbein Burnt Sienna is lovely and granulating, and I really love this shade. It's almost like the Mahogany Brown in Schmincke, not this one, but the other one I was talking about. It's just a little bit lighter than that one, but it has a lot of the same qualities that I like. This next one is Daniel Smith Quin Gold. And Quin Gold is one of my favorite yellows to use in palettes. The Daniel Smith is actually not my favorite one, although it's beautiful, and I certainly would not turn it away and like it in this palette. But my favorite is Schmincke, which is what I have in my main palette now. And the only way I learned what I like and didn't like is by playing with all of these different colors and mixing them with different colors and seeing, you know, which tones I like better. And I would encourage all of you to do the same thing because that's how you learn what you like. So this next one is Maramé Blue Payne's Gray. And Maramé Blue is another artist quality brand that I don't have a lot of. Again, probably partially because of the expense. The colors are really beautiful. This is a beautiful Payne's Gray. It's really deep bluish gray, which is just lovely. Okay. Apparently my husband is putting in an Instacart order. I swear, anytime I start a video, I get texts. I'm not that popular, I promise. Okay, the next one. Okay, I will look at it. So the next one is Daniel Smith Lunar Violet. Oh, I'm sorry, Lunar Black, not Violet. Got a little frazzled because of the text there. And this is one that I have on a lot of palettes, and then sadly I feel like it gets kind of ignored in every palette it's in. Just because, although I love the granulation and I love the way this looks as far as a texture, I always feel like it makes things a little too dark. So maybe I need to have a little bit of a lighter hand and just not mix as much with other colors, and then I might use it more. It also makes a lovely gray if you water it down. This next one is Daniel Smith Rose of Ultramarine, which is a lovely, lovely color, and I have this on several palettes as well. It is a mix of PB29, which is ultramarine blue, and then a violet, which I can't remember which number, but it is, it's very hard to mix for some reason. I've tried to mix it myself, and it's just never really come out right. So I get the tube version, and it's very beautiful. And this actually leads to some really interesting mixes if you mix it with green. That's always fun. I've become really fond of mixing complementary colors. Okay, let's see. What is the next one here? The next one is Daniel Smith Olive Green. And this is one that I don't have on a lot of palettes, but I'm really gravitating more towards this kind of color. So I might try to use it more. But it's a beautiful, beautiful color. The only reason why I have this color to begin with is there was a shop that I had been purchasing art supplies from online, and they went out of business, and they had a huge sale where they had Daniel Smith watercolors for I believe it was less than $5 for a 15mm tube, which is crazy cheap. And this was one of the colors I picked up. It wasn't necessarily a color I normally liked at that point in time, but now I'm really glad I picked it up because I do quite like it now. The last one here is Daniel Smith Buff Titanium. Buff Titanium is really good on its own for painting sand, some lighter buildings. It's also really nice to mix with other colors and sort of make them a little bit pastel-y, if that's a word. And you can also mix it with some colors to make your colors a little bit more opaque. But as you can see, for the most part, these colors are pretty neutral in tone. There's nothing super bright other than maybe the yellow Sophie from Sennelier, but it's always good to have a bright yellow on your palette so that you can make some nice greens. All right, so let's see which colors I chose. I did indeed choose the yellow Sophie from Sennelier as my yellow. I chose the deep scarlet as my red, and I chose the phthalo blue red shade as my blue. So these are all fairly bright with the exception of deep scarlet, which is a little bit more muted. But I'm really excited to see what these colors make. So I'm going to start with the red because that's on the top, and I am going to start with the deep scarlet. I may have mixed with deep scarlet before on a prior triad. I'm just blanking right now as to whether I did or not. Okay. Oh, and I should probably get my little mixing area here close to me. I rinsed off my brush instead of putting that in the mixing area. Then I'm going to go to the yellow, this yellow Sophie. So even though this paint's a little sticky and had problems in the pan, it doesn't seem to have any problem going onto the paper or looking funny on paper. So I'm not all that concerned about having it in these palettes like this, but it's still tacky to the touch. It's sticky to the touch. Okay, so this is 1-to-1 the red and the yellow, making this beautiful orange. And I'm going to rinse my brush. I don't have a whole lot of color left here in my mixing palette, but I'm going to see if I can make it work. So I'm going to mix part of that. No, I'm going to have to get some more paint there. Okay, so this is with a little bit more yellow. It's a lighter orange here. And then I'm going to mix some more of the red, and then this is, oh, I think I needed a little bit more yellow there. That red is really intense, so it's kind of hard to tone it down in this in-between color here. And I probably washed that out a little bit too much, but you'll get the idea there. So now I'm going to go to the blue, which is this phthalo blue red shade. I'm going to wipe out my mixing area real quick here. And I'm going to go with the blue and the red first. So I'll go from the top down. So putting that in some of my palette here. And then I'm going to get the red, mix that up. Whoa, that made a beautiful purple. So these two together just make a really beautiful deep dark purple. It's almost a neutral. Okay, and I do have enough in my palette now, so I'm going to, with half of that, I am going to mix some more red. And that's a beautiful red too, just on its own. And then in the other half, I'm going to mix some more blue. This blue is really strong, so you have to make sure not to add too much there. And there, that's beautiful. That's like a grayish blue. Lovely. So that's kind of what I was talking about. These are the kind of darks that you can get mixing these two colors together, and it makes some really nice grays. Oh, looks like I put my hand on the yellow here. I'm going to just wipe that off a little bit. I believe this is a staining color, so it might be a little hard to get off, but let me add a little bit more there. Okay, and I am going to wipe off my palette again. And then this time we're going to go with the yellow and the blue. So I'm going to put a bit of the yellow in my palette. I'm trying to be generous with the yellow because the blue can be very overpowering. Okay. But that is a lovely blue, or I'm sorry, green. It is a lovely blue too, which makes a very lovely green. All right. It's been a very long week, I apologize. I feel like no one seems to care that coronavirus is going on. Everybody wants business as usual. At least I can work from home. Okay, and then I'm going to mix more of the blue into this green mix here and get this really beautiful teal. And then I'm going to leave what I have in my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit of red to that to see if we can get to a neutral. As usual, this might take a little bit of finagling to get it right. It's kind of hard to make it so that no one color is dominant, and that blue definitely wants to be dominant. Okay, so I think I have a neutral. It's a little bit purpley, but I think that it's still kind of in the brown neutral territory there. And there's no right or wrong about mixing neutrals. It's all about, you know, figuring out the right ratio of each color to use. And that's really just trial and error, I think. Okay, I am going to wipe off this palette real quick. And then I'm going to show this to you closer up, and then I'm going to show you the full palette again. So these are pretty much dry now, and you can see beautiful, beautiful granulating on this olive green. Olive green is actually a color I really gravitate to these days. I'm really happy to be swatching it again because now I might add it to some other palettes. A lot of these are granulating. The Burnt Sienna by Holbein, the Lunar Black, of course, the Rose of Ultramarine, and Olive Green, and I think pretty much the rest of them. Oh no, and the Rhodonite, the genuine Rhodonite, is also a little bit granulating. And so is Buff Titanium, actually. So it's about 50-50. Okay, and then I'm going to show you the triad here. It's a little bit of a messy triad today, but I think you can tell the color combinations here. I'm really loving the greens and especially these neutrals here. The yellows or the oranges I'm just okay with. This one I think I watered out a little bit too much, clearly, but it gives you an indication of, you know, what kind of shades and tones you can get here. I'm going to show you the palette one more time. So here you go. And to tell you about the sizes, so these smaller ones are about equivalent of a quarter pan of a normal pan, and these larger ones are the equivalent of a half pan of the normal plastic little pans. And they do fit quite nicely in here. You could fit whole pans, or not whole pans, half pans, maybe whole pans, depending on how you organized it. I did test those out, and I was able to put them in here, but you had to make sure that they were really tightly placed in the middle, because otherwise they would knock on this piece here and you wouldn't be able to close it. But if you had them just in the middle, you could put full-size pans. But I just kind of wanted to spread it out a little bit more than that allowed me to do, and the configuration here really was a better use of space, I thought, so I used these. I'm going to leave that open so that can dry a little bit, but I'll close it just so you can see the case itself, and then has this on the back, and I probably just turned some upside down. Yes, totally. That happens when your watercolors get a little dried out in the pans. Supposedly, if you mix the tube color after you've poured it in here and kind of smush it up into the edges, it'll stick a little bit better. But I never do that. I never use a toothpick or anything to do that. I just feel like it's kind of wasteful with using all the toothpicks because you can't really use them more than once. I suppose you could wipe them off, but then you might contaminate your other colors. But just a thought for the future. All right, so that's it for today. Feel free to subscribe so you can see future videos. We're almost done with this swatching series, so stay tuned for the next one. I apologize for my snafus today. You know, I can't be 100% every day, but since I'm making videos almost every day, you get to see the good and the bad. So there it is. All right, have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.